Welcome to this GSA webinar, Evidence-Based Strategies for Creating Age-Inclusive Campuses. My name is Jen Pettis, and I'm the Director of Strategic Alliances at the Gerontological Society of America, or GSA. We have a few housekeeping items to go through before we get started for the webinar. We will use the Q&A function throughout the program, so please comment or ask your questions there. I'll ask our presenters the questions following the remarks. And while we will attempt to answer all questions, if there are any that we don't get to, our presenters will answer them via email following the program. Our program today is being recorded and it will be archived on the GSA website. It will be available on demand along with the resources that will be discussed during today's program. The link to the materials is geron.org/AIDHE. There will be a brief survey immediately following the webinar, which will be dropped into the chat box. And now let me ask Nina Silverstein to introduce herself, provide an overview of our program, and introduce our other panelists.
Thank you, Jen. Hello, and welcome to the second of two webinars we are presenting on increasing age inclusivity in higher education. Our first webinar on assessing campuses for age-inclusive policies and practice is available on demand on the GSA website that Jen just mentioned to you. In addition to all our colleagues in the US, I would like to welcome international colleagues joining us as we recognize the upcoming International Day of Older Persons on October 1st. Our presenters are all members of a research team that has been collaborating on age-inclusive efforts since 2018. I am Nina Silverstein, and I am joined by colleagues Susan Krause-Whitbourne and Lauren Marshall-Bowen from the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and Joanne Montepar from LaSalle University. In today's webinar, we'll be focusing on the evidence-based strategies emerging from our multi-phase, multi-year research supported by the RRF Foundation on Aging. These strategies are in the core institutional domains of teaching and learning, personnel, and student affairs. As you will see in the model that we present today, there are other domains that remain, so there's still work to be done. We also share several resources, including two infographics that we encourage you to download and use to open conversations about this topic on your campuses. The resources are shared directly with today's registrants and are posted on the GSA website. In addition, we provide several citations to publications that provide greater detail to the information that we'll present today. We thank the Gerontological Society of America and its Academy for Gerontology and Higher Education for hosting this webinar. We also thank our partners at the American Council on Education and the Age-Friendly University Global Network for their help in promoting this session. And now we're ready to turn to Joanne to start us off.
Thanks, Nina. So briefly, the plan for today's webinar is for me to begin with some comments about the need and value of creating more age-inclusive campuses. Then I'm going to describe two initiatives that are guiding this mission, and I'm going to tell you more about the age inclusivity demands of higher education, AIDHE, model that has guided our work. From there, we're going to get into the heart of the webinar and tell you about the strategies that we identified through an empirical process that involved input from age-diverse students, faculty and staff, and from leaders in higher education. So let's turn now to the driving question. Why should higher education even care about being more age-inclusive? Well, we're all aware and we're extremely thankful that scholars and educators in the aging field across our campuses have made great strides in accumulating knowledge and developing programs and practices that address aging-related issues. However, they also recognize, as we all do, that the need to be more age-inclusive is becoming even more evident in higher education. And this is especially true as our social structure is undergoing dramatic shifts as our population becomes older and more age diverse than it ever has been. So the population pyramid that we are so well acquainted with, that has reliably filled the ranks of college students each year in the US is now a pillar in which people over the age of 60 are outnumbering younger people. And as a result, in higher education, the traditional aged college student category is fading. And these shifts are resulting in more people looking at educational opportunities across their lifespans. So as people experience increased longevity, they're changing their jobs more frequently, and they're looking for educational opportunities to retool in their current careers, but also to get training and certification and advanced degrees in new areas of work. And this shift also includes individuals over the age of 25 who have yet to complete a college degree and are considering how they can do that. This all points to the new reality that higher education is becoming a regular destination for people of all ages. And so, given that there are fewer people aged 18 to 22 who are seeking education, we believe this is a powerful moment to prepare for an economic lift rather than the enrollment cliff. We also know that shifting age demographics are fueling a longevity economy. You can read at length about this in several publications that's been produced by the Gerontological Society of America. And in this longevity economy, people who are living longer lives are driving the demands for products and services and innovations across many industry and business sectors that are tailored to their needs and interests. And so, we're also seeing the need to extend education about aging to all of our students as they enter a workforce that's not only more age diverse, but it's also in need of practitioners across a wide range of careers with knowledge about aging related issues. And the impact of these demographic shifts has consequences well beyond our student population. This should hit home for many of us here today. Faculty and staff in higher education are not only more age diverse than they ever have been, but we're also aging in place across our campuses. And this contemporary workplace is calling for our institutions to consider how they can better support faculty and staff like ourselves, both personally and professionally across our careers. It's also important to note that more age-inclusive education efforts on our campuses can help to dismantle age stereotypes, age biases, and age discrimination, which continues to be prevalent in our society. And we've seen a lot of this in recent years. And certainly last but not least is to consider that the call to be more age inclusive is being heard across other environments that includes our cities and our states, our healthcare system, and our businesses. And this is creating what has come to be known as the age-friendly ecosystem that surrounds how we think locally and nationally about age. So in short, we'd like to make the claim that more age-inclusive practices, programs, and policies on our campuses that also extend to support our community are really a benefit for everybody. So to advance age-inclusive practices that speak to the issues that I just described, two pioneering approaches have emerged. These approaches are the Age-Friendly University, AFU, Global Network, and the Age Inclusivity Domains of Higher Education, AIDHE initiatives. The AFU initiative was launched by Dublin City University, Arizona State University, and the University of Strathclyde, and it offers 10 principles for how higher education can support older populations through lifelong learning, intergenerational exchange, and aging-focused education and research. At present, the AFU Global Network consists of over 110 colleges and universities across the globe, and the number of institutions who are interested in joining the AFU Global Network continues to grow at a steady pace. And a good number of these institutions are in the US, and many of them are affiliates of GSA and its Academy for Gerontology and Higher Education, AIDHE. So to extend its reach in advanced age inclusivity, in 2023, GSA and AIDHE adopted the Age Inclusivity Domains of Higher Education model, the AIDHE model, which our research team developed over the last few years with support from the RRF Foundation for Aging. And this model is guiding the information that you're going to hear about today. So let me tell you a little bit more about the model. The AIDHE model advocates that age-inclusive practices be viewed across 7 core institutional functions, which are teaching and learning, student affairs, outreach and engagement, personnel, research, services and resources, and the physical environment. So here you see a more detailed description of the types of practices and the domains that they entail. You'll also see this information in the infographic that Nina talked about. And the strategies that you're going to hear about today reflect what we see as 3 high-need high-impact domains, teaching and learning, student affairs, and personnel. So practices within the teaching and learning domain support the curricular needs of age-diverse students. They speak to age-related course offerings, and they address age-friendly classroom climate. Practices within the student affairs domain support age-friendly admissions and recruitment efforts, academic and career advising, and programs such as student clubs and organizations. And then finally, practices within the personnel domain support age inclusivity in hiring and promotions, professional development and advancement opportunities for older faculty and staff, retirement planning, and practices such as the recognition of longstanding employees. So as you can see, with the focus of these three domains, the AIDHE model extends the view of age inclusivity by recognizing the experiences of age-diverse students, as well as faculty and staff. And so now Susan is going to tell you about how our AIDH model guided the research that we conducted to identify the recommendations in these three domains.
Thank you, Joanne, and welcome to everybody. So glad to have so many of you here today to hear about these strategies that we believe can be fully implemented on campuses, definitely in the country and around the world. But building off the AIDHE model, or I should say maybe even fundamental to it, was the assumption that campuses are not only age diverse, but they're also diverse in terms of constituents, and each have their own separate issues and concerns, but also everybody has the same goal in mind, which is to provide the best education possible for the students. So students are ultimately, of course, the ones who benefit from greater age inclusivity, but it's because when faculty and staff are performing their jobs in a way that allows them to feel included and allows them to feel that their productivity is valued, that the AIDHE model shows you the importance of personnel and various services and other resources available to everyone on campus, but faculty and staff are the ones for whom this is the workplace. And as my colleague Nina has often said, are aging in place on these campuses. So these cogs in the machinery really convey that idea that everybody works together with the same goal in mind. And the question is, how can we achieve that goal, and how does age inclusivity fit into that? So next, we'll take a look at the basis for our work, which already began with a huge survey of faculty, staff, and students around the country who responded to what we call the climate survey. And they talked about, in this climate survey, which probably many of you are familiar with the campus climate survey, but this one was particular to age inclusivity. And we derived from their responses, primarily the open-ended responses, because we had data from the survey that we used to analyze their perceptions of the campus and their, not only the climate, but the age inclusive practices. But then they had an opportunity to respond to just open-ended questions, anything else they would like to say. And that led us to a mere, well, there were 6,831 participants, and we had a lot of strategies to sort through. And we used those to feed in to the second part of the research, which was to present these strategies to focus groups who were designed to reflect on all of these, but they were specific to their own area. So we had faculty, staff, and students, and they were responding to the challenges in these three domains of teaching and learning, and personnel, and student affairs. So the focus groups chewed over these strategies. They debated them. Of course, we had structured questions that we gave to them to try to elicit from them what they thought would be good ideas for strategies. We took that, and there were 78 people in that, as you can see, 16 different groups. They were all run in a standard fashion for their group, and all of the responses were then transcribed, sorted out once again into categories, and we then were able to whittle it down to the strategies that we then presented to the Delphi panel. So if you're familiar with the Delphi panel approach, It sounds like Greek wise people, but in research, of course, you have a group of people who respond to one set of ideas. It's an iterative process. They then they send those ideas back, and they did these in a Qualtrics survey that they were presented with. So they all had the same questions to answer. And then the next round, they looked at those again. So in round one, we asked the panel to evaluate the strategies to the extent to which each one was feasible, likely to be implemented on campus. And you can see here, there were 21 challenges, 53 strategies, 18 experts. And these experts were selected specifically to be experts. The panelists were selected to be experts in higher education. They came from a range of different kinds of positions in higher education, from faculty to administrators, and then to national leaders in higher education. So they sorted through those. They came up with, in round two, these strategies being analyzed for the criteria of priority, impact, feasibility, and likelihood. Now, this was important because we wanted these strategies to be actionable. I mean, it's one thing to have a strategy and it sounds great, and it's another thing to then have a strategy that somebody thinks will actually be used. So that was our plan, was to get these large number of strategies whittled down, iterated around the experts, and then we came up with a final list of 23 strategy recommendations. And these included awareness and information about age diversity and age bias. So next, we had these challenges that the panel viewed as high priorities. And so rising to the top was this idea of campus awareness, that members of campus communities are often unaware of age inclusivity issues and resources. This is what we found in our research, was that even if a campus was doing sort of age inclusive practices, people weren't aware of those. So number one, rising to the top, making campuses aware. In the area of teaching and learning, we then came up with these other, and these are challenges viewed as high priorities. Non-traditional older students feel excluded, out of place, or disadvantaged in their classroom learning. And this we also saw kind of across the board, even going back to the survey, the open-ended responses. And so luckily these did emerge as high priority challenges. We then heard that students don't have sufficient opportunities to learn about aging. And this, of course, is very consistent with the AFU. We need to have more coursework on aging, more opportunities. And thirdly, classes could do more to take advantage of the assets of age diversity, some of those benefits that Joanne was talking about earlier. Then in the realm of student affairs, the domain of student affairs, we found that student affairs services needed to address what so-called non-traditional and older students faced in their education. And these, we defined them as students over the age of 25, just as a rough way to define them. But we all know that non-traditional students aren't just defined by age, and they have all these obligations, balancing caregiving, work, and family obligations. Another challenge is that financial aid often disadvantages students who aren't recent high school graduates. Sometimes this comes up even in the application for financial aid. There's no place to put in there the kinds of experiences that non-traditional students have. Number three, career services doesn't always provide support that is tailored to the needs of older students, and especially second career job seekers whose concerns are different than those of their fellow students. And then the fourth area is targeting older students, non-traditional students, through marketing and recruitment efforts. What kind of materials are provided to try to recruit new students? So these all emerged as challenges that were high priorities. Again, going back to this Delphi idea, we came up with all these ideas and problems. What did the experts say were really the high priorities? So we'll move on now to strategies, and Lauren will tell you what we found with respect to specific strategies. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Susan. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. So I have the pleasure of getting a chance to introduce the strategies that we finally are able to recommend based on the process Susan just described. So before I get to the final set of 23 strategies for the 3 specific domains, I want to start with these 3 overarching strategies panelists recommended. So in response to that main challenge, which Susan mentioned, that members of campus communities are often unaware of age inclusivity issues and resources, which was consistently raised during focus groups, we presented the panel with 3 potential strategies to increase awareness over and above the domains of teaching and learning, student affairs, and personnel. All 3 strategies were evaluated highly, thus confirming the recommendation that institutions work to raise greater awareness of age diversity, friendliness, and inclusivity on campuses, to provide information and education on age bias and working in an age diverse environment, and to use research tools to assess the specific age inclusive resource needs of older students, faculty, and staff on your local campus. So now I'm going to talk about how the remaining strategies were evaluated and sorted. So as Susan noted earlier, our focus group process yielded 53 domain-specific strategies for our Delphi panelists to review in order to create a more focused list of strategies with the most recommendation value. That is, strategies that showed potential for being both transformative and actionable. So these qualities were measured through panelist scoring of each strategy's potential impact, priority, feasibility, and likelihood of implementation. And to advance as recommendations, strategies had to meet high score thresholds from a simple majority of panelists in at least 3 of these 4 criteria. So based on the pattern of ratings, we eliminated strategies that didn't make the cut and then organized remaining strategies into these 3 distinct tiers. So tier 1 strategies are those that received high priority, high impact, high feasibility, and high likelihood scores. So these are the slam dunk strategies that were scored highest in all 4 areas. Tier 2 strategies received high priority and impact scores, but varied with respect to their feasibility or likelihood. So in other words, these are strategies with high transformative potential, but depending on local campus context, may require a bit more careful thought for implementation. And finally, tier 3 is the inverse. These strategies were seen as having high feasibility and likelihood, but varied with respect to their priority or impact. So you might think of these strategies as low-hanging fruit opportunities. They're the easiest to grab. So this process resulted in a final set of 23 recommended strategies across our 3 high-impact domains. Again, that's teaching and learning, student affairs, and personnel. So now the moment we've all been waiting for, what are the strategies? So I'm going to show you the final list, but I'm not going to talk about each strategy individually given our time constraints, but I'll offer some general commentary about them. So let's start with teaching and learning, which you'll see yielded 5 recommended strategies. These strategies reflect the need for flexible programs, practices, and policies that allow age-diverse students to balance their academic pursuits with their personal and professional lives. Moreover, there's much faculty and academic advising staff can do to recognize and to help others recognize the diverse experiences of older students as assets in the classroom. As a start, for example, faculty can design courses and activities that don't assume all students enter the classroom with the same life experience or generational context. Interestingly, none of the strategies related to teaching and learning rose to tier 1 status, as none were given the highest scores for both transformative and actionable potential. Although a tier 2 recommendation here is that campuses should make existing age-related course content more appealing to students, such as through renaming, course titles, many of the strategies that were dropped from our list included recommendations to increase opportunities for students to learn about aging, including expanding aging content or aging courses in the curriculum, or developing language toward an age inclusivity policy for syllabi, and facilitating intergenerational learning opportunities in and beyond the classroom. This was something we didn't expect to see, especially as gerontology educators. Inclusion of aging content in the curriculum is a critical practice for advancing age inclusivity, and it's certainly an issue for us to discuss further and understand better. But panelists suggested that decisions and efforts around teaching and learning were considered within the purview of faculty, and so would need to follow their lead and input more directly in order to support culture change in the classroom. 6 strategies emerged as recommendations to address student affairs challenges regarding admissions, financial aid, career services, and student programs. Reinforcing the teaching and learning strategies, one thing you'll see is that many of these strategies point to the importance of flexibility and adaptability around practices and programs that involve age-diverse students. Among the Tier 1 strategies recommended is the suggestion to incorporate age diversity in recruitment strategies and materials so that non-traditional and older learners can envision themselves as part of the campus community. The Tier 2 and 3 strategies point to the importance of skills and career-focused practices for older adults, older students, with emphasis on how to coach those looking for additional credentialing and second careers rather than just entry-level applicants. The attention to the difference age and experience makes is also needed at admissions, as application questions sometimes focus on experiences common to recent high school graduates and leave less room for students who have been gaining life experience out of school. And this final set of strategies shifts from a focus on students to faculty and staff. Since faculty and staff are undoubtedly part of the age-diverse campus community, and moreover, thriving faculty and staff can support a strong foundation for academic institutions, as Susan's 3 gears showed us. So these 12 strategies were recommended to address personnel challenges regarding professional development and advancement opportunities, age biases in employment practices, and a lack of recognition of long-standing employees. Tier 1 strategies here include offering age bias training for search committees and supporting the promotion of qualified internal candidates for higher level staff positions. In Tier 2, offering professional development opportunities, including compensation, and reviewing salaries and furloughing practices for equity were identified as having enormous potential for transforming the age-inclusive culture of a campus, even if such practices may come at a greater financial or time cost. In Tier 3, the low-hanging fruit, are strategies likely familiar to most of us already, including creating job ads that avoid age bias, creating co-mentoring programs, and recognizing, awarding, and honoring the accomplishments and service of longstanding employees and retirees. And just as a reminder, all of the strategies I've just outlined are available in the infographic ready for download, as well as a second infographic outlining the AIDHE model, which is now available in the chat. And with that, I'll turn things over to Nina, who will return us to the bigger picture of our project.
Thank you, Lauren. So let me say a few words about the implications to practice, policy, and research of the work that we've described to you today. First, we learned that developing age-inclusive strategies requires a multifaceted, multidimensional approach, and that the core dimension should consider both the transformative capacities as well as actionable capacities of a strategy. Also, it's useful to consider the balance of these capacities for identifying potential practices. As you saw, our findings show that promoting age-inclusive strategies requires a balance of transformative and actionable potential, and that some of the strategies with the greatest transformative potential may require more effort and investment of resources. That said, there are also strategies that campuses can easily start implementing today, and as noted earlier, we call these low-hanging fruit. We now see this as challenging for those of us interested in advancing age inclusivity in higher education to look more closely at the barriers that are holding institutions back from pursuing these impactful opportunities. And how can we begin to break down those barriers? In closing, we would also like to stress several points that Joanne had mentioned in the beginning, and I want to reiterate today that we hope you take from today's webinar. The demographic shifts are not trends, they're here to stay. The enrollment cliff can actually turn out to be an economic lift for institutions. And higher education is a destination, but it's also an engine. And particularly as we're thinking about second careers and retooling and additional credentialing. And age inclusivity offers opportunities, and age inclusivity, we believe, benefits everyone. Before we get to your questions, we want to leave you with information about a few resources. For more information about the efforts to increase age inclusivity in higher education, we encourage you to explore resources available through the Gerontological Society of America's dedicated webpage using the QR code displayed, and to visit the Age-Friendly University Global Network website as well. And we direct you to our previous webinar last April and several recent publications based on our own age inclusivity research. Those participating in this live webinar will receive a follow-up message from GSA with all these resources, so don't bother trying to capture them now. And colleagues who will watch this webinar on demand can access the resources on the GSA website. Now we're ready for your questions and comments. Jen has been monitoring the Q&A for us, but please use this time to enter any additional thoughts. And of course, you can always follow up with us at our project email address, which is umass.afustuddy@umb.edu. Okay, thank you. Jen?
Thanks so much, Nina. All right, we have some questions coming in here. Let's get started with, there's the chat. Are there ways to evaluate the extent of age-inclusive campus practices at an institution?
Thank you for that question. That's a great question. I first refer you to the webinar we did last April, but now I'm going to refer you to Susan to describe a little bit about that and all the resources we developed on that area.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is a great question because much of what we presented today is based on the assumption that some of this assessment has been done. But it is really important for an institution or for a system, for that matter, to take stock of what they're doing, because one of the main findings from our research, and I'll talk about the assessment method in a minute, is that, and I mentioned this earlier, people don't know what the institutions are doing, but sometimes the institutions aren't doing those things either. So it cuts both ways. And sometimes people think something's being done and it's not being done. So all of this, is a great deal of uncertainty, which can be resolved with some work, but institutions engage in sort of taking stock of how they're doing in so many different ways. And oddly enough, this hasn't been an area where there have been a lot of tools developed. But fortunately, we do have a tool. It is just it's all on the GSA website. But just to walk you through it really briefly, it's a two-pronged assessment process. One is assessing the actual practices that university says it's doing or the system says it's doing. And this is done by going to department heads and unit directors and asking them. So we have a list of what we have synthesized down to age-friendly practices, and they cover all 7 domains, but they're spread out across departments. And so our assessment tool, number 1, is an Excel reporting format sheet with a bunch of yes/no questions and some numbers provided, but mainly something that can easily be answered by anybody in a given department, like the library or career services or the provost's office. And so these questions get answered, they get scored, and then simultaneously, because you don't have to happen in stages, you can do a climate survey, which we've also developed, and that is available. Everything is available in terms, it's a Qualtrics survey, and there's also instructions for how to taper it if you need to, or tailor it to your institution or your system. So it has a great deal of flexibility in it. But the core of it assesses the awareness of campus practices. So there's the practices that the administrators say they're doing, and then there's campus awareness. And then there are questions about perceptions of age friendliness. We called it age friendliness as our term in the research. But how comfortable, respected, valued, and welcome do people feel? And you can get different age groups, different constituents all responding to that. And then you can also find out people's personal beliefs. Are they in favor of more age-inclusive classes? It's not an ageism scale per se. It would sort of start out that way, and it ended up being more specific to educational climate, which we thought was better for our purposes. So you score all 3 of those, but the main assessment tool is calculating the match between what the administrators say they're doing in these 7 areas, the perceptions that all 3 campus constituents have, comparing those. And when it all gets done, everything is scored, you end up with an overall match score, which shows the extent to which there is a awareness of campus an accurate awareness of campus practices, meaning people say not only what the university or campus does do, but what they don't, and they're aware of that. So it takes some tooling up to do, but fortunately, everything is really spelled out. We've been through this with 23 campuses and then some additional campuses who we've consulted with, and we really got all the syntax works, so it's very exciting. You can run the data once you have it and really come up with a nice format that you can then use for research purposes, for institutional research. Feed it to your administrators, feed it to your trustees, whoever it is you're trying to make the case for, and you can show, here's where we are, and then here's where we need to be. So in a nutshell, that's what the assessment procedure involves. And you can ask us questions about it too. If there are things that you'd like help with, we're happy to provide that.
Yeah. No,
So
I just want to add, no, thank you, Susan. I just want to add, so this assessment tool is, we refer to it as the ICCS, the Inventory and Campus Climate Survey. And as Susan said, on the GSA website, we have all the files you need to be able to conduct this assessment on your own, and including a technical manual. So we really encourage you to use it. Okay, Jen, next question.
Yep, thanks, Nina. This question comes from Kevin. We are a student organization at the University of Florida, lifelong learners of USF. We would like to network with other organizations, students, and other stakeholders. How do we get started? Please respond here. And also, he sent his email.
Yeah, I think I'm going to ask Joanne to respond to that.
I think one place to start is to get familiar with the AFU Global Network, because what they are starting to do now is to develop a set of kind of communities, for people with different interests, to be able to connect and talk about their work. So, for example, there's a community around retired and emeriti faculty. There are people who are interested in service. There are people who are interested in intergenerational relations. So I would do that. Also, GSA, if you're a member of GSA, has wonderful, wonderful interest groups, including the Age Inclusivity and Higher Education interest group, which you're welcome to join. And I'm one of the conveners of that, as well as Katie Terhune at Northern Kentucky University. And, we're happy to hear what people in our interest group want to talk about, and to develop, times to get together to be able to do that.
Thank you, Joanne. Next, we have a question from Kathleen. What strategies have been the most potential to shift culture away from ageism and promote intergenerational collaboration?
Okay. Kathleen, that's a great question. And to me, that sounds like a research question that we wouldn't be able to answer at this moment. But do we have our thoughts, our individual thoughts about it? Certainly. And after I offer one, I'm going to turn to my colleagues and have them offer a thought as well. I think that probably one of the strategies that I'd like to see worked at would be in personnel, as Lauren was talking about the need for age bias training. The idea of in hiring and promotion to have more people involved with that, and try to reach those individuals. I think that would be great. Lauren, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, it's also on the personnel side, the sort of co-mentoring recommendation to think about mentoring as not just something for sort of more experienced faculty and staff to support newer faculty and staff, but to see it as sort of a co-mentoring relationship to break down some of the generational tensions that focus groups were sort of calling our attention to. In the classroom, I think the biggest takeaway is increasing pedagogical strategies for recognizing older learners as assets, as opposed to non-traditional, students who need to be accommodated in some way, that they're actually bringing strengths to the classroom to enhance learning for everyone, so that students of all ages can benefit from their experience.
I think something else to consider is, as people are working on age-inclusive practices on their campuses, we work usually within our own area. We're working with the Center on Aging, or if we're working with gerontology faculty or faculty in lifespan development. And, we've been advised from our wonderful mentors at the RRF Foundation is to, move beyond the aging spaces. So this means to be able to connect with your DEI officers, to be doing work with, your administrators in, professional studies, to connect with people in your advising programs, to start to really branch out and to look at, how you can develop collaborative work that helps to address some of these issues, and to develop programs that are going to be open with a more intergenerational focus. And they're very interested in doing these kinds of things, especially as you come with the wealth of knowledge that you have and the wealth of experience that you have, to provide them with some ideas about what they might do and how they might do it. And that, making those connections across your campus is really a way to build the infrastructure, and to have a stronger base and a wider base of buy-in from individuals.
Okay, Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, I have an idea about that too, which is, here's a little pitch for the ICCS, because what we found was that we couldn't just predict what would be important for a campus or what people would say. I mean, we took a really open-minded, approach to this. And of course, the most disappointing thing, I mean, Lauren mentioned courses. I mean, more aging courses, please, which we're all, crying about, wasn't there as one of the top strategies. But, I think it really has to be grounded in the institution's sensibilities and priorities. And of course, here it's really important to be working hand in hand with administrators, both bottom up, top down, trying to get a sense of what the campus finds as most pressing. Of course, you want to look at national comparisons, and you want to be able to look towards what's out there, but you're ultimately going to be selling this on your own campus. And that's really what's going to have the most impact.
Okay. Thank you. Our next question comes from Shannon. Do experience, data, or your gut suggest that different types of universities, primarily smaller versus larger, better able to incorporate the principles?
Shannon, thank you for that question. I'll take a first stab, and then I offer my colleagues to let me know too. I think it comes down to the champion on campus. Is there a champion on campus, no matter if it's a small campus or a large campus? That you will find those individuals, and where there's a will, there's a way. We don't have actual data, although we were trying to look. We did ask about public and private, and I think we were finding more so with the public universities were more likely to embrace this, but I don't know. I really have a definitive. Does anyone else on the team?
I do not. I mean, we mostly had publics. And I think one key issue is that public institutions stemming from a land grant, the land grant, are more service-oriented, are more oriented towards community and these broader sets of needs. But it's not to say that, privates should be looking at this too. I mean, you talk about enrollments, and privates, going to have to find ways to keep their classes filled, because it's to everybody's, peril that they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, I'm just thinking of institutions that I know that are big institutions, and small institutions like my institution. This is the exciting thing about it, is I think that what we're doing appeals to all institutions. But I think what I see as a common element of the institutions that are making some headway is they have a team. So they have a team in place that consists not only of, somebody in the aging field, but connected in other areas as well. And I think that really helps. It really does take a village. And so that really helps to get buy-in from other people.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Our next comment and question come from James, saying it's a wonderful presentation and thanking you all. And his question is, one challenge is getting funded. Any suggestions?
Okay, James, thank you so much for that question. And I really want to answer this. This was an idea that that we wanted to do, and in the first case, I call it my Tom Sawyer approach. I'm building a fence. Do you want to come and join me? I'm having a good time. That's how I got Susan involved. And I'm thinking you don't really need to in the beginning, and that's when we first did an audit tool first before developing the ICCS. And it was no funding at all. We really, I think, well, actually what we did do was to offer a graduate student an independent study, and that was critical for it. So to get the pilot going, we were not funded. And I always, I'm someone who really likes to do participatory action research. So I love involving students and community in doing research. So that seemed to work. We then got some internal funding from a small grant from the university, from the college, because we're doing interdisciplinary, and that's how we brought Lauren in. Lauren is a professor of English on our campus. So, that was, we got seed money there. And then that put us in a position of being able to apply for funding. And I was real happy to see that our project officer from the RRF Foundation for Aging is one of the participants here. So, but you really, not having funding wasn't going to stop us from doing it. Anyway, so that was one response. Any other reaction to it? Susan?
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think, going to university's institutional research office, and you got to show what the, bang is going to be for the buck. But if you make this case about age diversity, or even do a quick head count of the age diversity on your campus, you can then make that case that, well, we have these constituents. And I mean, it doesn't, I think a lot of the cost for us was getting the whole thing kind of done, and the research instruments themselves. I mean, that was pretty heavy lifting there. But they're done. And so it could be incorporated as part of the university's IR program. I think that would be ideal. Well, outside funding is ideal, but if you can't, I think it's a legitimate question to ask administrators for support for.
Great.
I know some institutions or some colleagues have looked towards community or state funding, especially for communities and states that are engaged in age-friendly communities work. So there might be some opportunities to partner there and to get some kind of local or state funding targeted for some very specific projects that you're interested in.
The next question, I think, is a quick one from Carolyn, is wondering, what age are you referring to? 65 and older, or 35 and older, or something else in the classroom?
Okay, Lauren, that one's yours.
Sure thing. This will be, yes, it will be a quick one. So for students, we were talking about sort of two groups: the 25 and over, which is sort of a higher ed definition of non-traditional age. But we also differentiated them from what we were calling older learners, which were age 50 plus. And that was true of faculty and staff as well. 50 plus was the group we were talking about.
Thanks, Lauren. Our next question is from an anonymous attendee. One very real barrier to addressing these challenges are the competing expectations of institutions, such as ensuring employability of students. What is the argument for age inclusivity, given this widespread attitude about the primary purpose of higher education?
Joanne.
I take that. You really need to read the GSA report on the longevity economy. And we have another report that will be coming out shortly as well. That looks at, the industry need for people with aging-related expertise and knowledge. So, I mean, that's the argument. The demographic trend doesn't just impact, individuals working in, what people immediately first go to, kind of healthcare related issues, but tourism, and home design. in marketing, all areas that you can think of are going to have as an audience a very age diverse audience. So, we want to prepare our students to be able to interact not only in an age diverse workplace, but also to work with the kinds of people that they're going to work with on a day-to-day basis in their industry sector. So I think, making that argument for education or educators who are interested in this kind of professional path, this way that students are going to be employable. They're going to be better prepared to navigate this new economy if they have some background around aging.
I would like to lean into that question, though. I totally agree with you, Joanne, but we heard that a lot. And one of the sort of perceived barriers we encountered was exactly this point. I mean, institutions of higher education are designed for college. So college, quote unquote, college age students. And it was something that we noticed in our focus groups. We noticed it less so in the Delphi, but it was a little perplexing given that our thoughts are so aligned with what Joanne just said. But yes, it's true. Higher education is designed, has been built for this age population, but it's got to change for all the reasons that Joanne said. But I think it's a valid point of view. And it certainly historically has been valid, but it is changing. I think when you encounter that sentiment, it's hard to argue with it. All you can do is provide data to the contrary, showing how things are changing. And the enrollment situation should be evidence enough, but so is the changing population, all the professions, all the areas that people are going to be needed in this field.
Okay,
I'd also add to that, this goes back to the reason why it's important to build coalitions and teams. So I know some institutions now have kind of learning communities that include gerontology and economics and communications. And what they're trying to do is to come up with resources like an aging-related module that faculty in different areas can embed in their classes, as a first step. To try to make aging information available across the curriculum in the same way that we've tried to integrate, information about other diversity issues. So again, this is an opportunity for people to really try to come together to build resources collaboratively.
Thanks. Our next question comes from Philip, and he asks, the modified pie chart, of domains includes research, but shouldn't it make mention of inclusivity of older people in helping set the university research agenda and form? I'm thinking that valuing participatory research and co-design would advance inclusivity in the research domain, going beyond just promoting more aging relating research on the part of the faculty.
Philip, thank you for that question. And what the pie chart shows is, what the larger topics were. If you to operationalize those each one of those domains, I encourage you to look at our inventory and campus climate survey items, because yes, we were not just asking about research about older people. We were the extent to which older persons themselves were involved in the research, doing research. So I think that that your answer might be in looking at what those items are, and I would say that we agree with you 100% on that.
Thanks. Next. Jessica, does somebody have another comment? Oh, no, okay. Jessica asked our next question, and this one particularly made me smile, and that is, hi, I'm a traditionally aged student at a university, and I'm curious what students my age specifically can do to help with age inclusivity on campuses.
Okay, thank you for that, and I will turn to another colleague as soon as they let me know that. But I would say, at first, you have multiple opportunities. One, look at the content, look at the curriculum that you're getting in your classes. To what extent does an English class include literature about aging? To what extent does a biology class go beyond age 40 in terms of the life course? So on the one hand, it's a question of like, to what extent is anything age related being adapted to any of your curriculum? Then it's like looking at your student organizations. To what extent are things, you know, family oriented, or I mean, recognizing the caregiving issues. When are clubs meeting? There's so much you can do, and I'm sure. Does anyone else want to add to it from Mike? Susan, go ahead.
Say intergenerational activities, and you know, we think of this in terms of service learning, but there's also, we just talked about research, community engaged research is a good way to get that interaction going. But yeah, I mean, intergenerational, and I mean, it really benefits everybody. It's not just a one-way like downstream effect or upstream from the younger to the older. Our students are very enriched by their interactions with older adults. I've always made service learning a part of my teaching. But it's engaged, you know, it isn't just service learning, it's this engagement. But I like what Nina said about taking a look at the times that activities are offered and groups get together, because that can be a barrier for people who don't live on campus or who aren't there during the day.
I also think that many of the issues that we've talked about today can make great topics for student research projects. You know, so if you're looking for a project in a class, or you're an honors student, or, you know, you want to do a special independent project with a faculty member, there are great ways to incorporate questions about age inclusivity. And then you'll end up with some data.
Yeah.
Which you can then present to your department chair and other leaders on campus who are interested in learning more.
And actually, I do want to add a great one project to start off with, and I know that Michelle Porter, one of our colleagues, is online as well, is to do a walkthrough of your campus. Look at the physical environment, and it'll be an eye-opener for you as to imagining you know, issues and challenges that some older persons and older people with disabilities may face. So that's another area. Okay.
Thank you all. We do have several questions left, but and like we said, our research team will answer them via email, but we have 1 minute left in our program. And
okay.
so I'm going to ask,
you know, I do want to take this next one. Mary, the question about, I mean, the 23 institutions that participated in our study, we produced 40-page confidential reports for each one of those campuses. And as part of our IRB, institutional review board process, we're not at liberty to release the names of those institutions. And we do refer to, that's in one of our publications. Susan, I think that was the one that you were first author on.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Research in higher ed.
In research in higher ed, that article is described there. Okay.
Thanks, Nina.
Well, thank you
for spending time with us today. We greatly appreciate you completing a brief evaluation that you'll receive as the program concludes. Please provide your feedback by clicking the survey link that you've been given as that comes up. And this is the end of the program. And I want to thank our presenters, our research team here for a wonderful program, and all of our audience participation. What great engagement we had today. So many thanks to you all, and have a wonderful weekend.